Come with me for a little walk. We're looking for grapevines today, but first we have to get past the cats. Psycho, because that's a psycho cat, and Data means mama. And they're always at my door, along with Mego, whom you may have seen in some videos. There are so many cats in Georgia. And as I leave the property I'm on, this is above me. Fig trees, pomegranate trees, plum trees, grapevines. But actually, let's sit at this table first, shall we? Hello and welcome to Georgian Crossroads. This is Byrne, your host du jour. And today is a mild, beautiful summer day. A few clouds in the skies, a little bit of breeze, not too oppressive. Although it is hot once you start looking around. But today what we're going to do is we're going to go out for a walk. Now actually this is a walk I took back in 2019. I've been thinking about it ever since. But I started noticing when I first got to Georgia, all of the kind of ornate wrought iron grill work, balconies, various designs and motifs that cover the older architecture here. And so what I decided to do was to go around and take a few images of it. But what I also discovered is that there's a very good reason why these motifs are here in Georgia. And the reason is because everywhere you go, there are grapevines and other vines and trees and vegetation everywhere. And what we're seeing in the traditional architecture here is a reflection of all of the vines and fruit and all of the other foliage and lushness that is growing around. So, come with me. We are going to go off for a walk and just go exploring, looking at neighborhoods. We're going to stay in the Mtatsminda area, but we're also going to just be looking at grapevines, looking at architecture, and just thinking about them. Come along. Well, first let's leave the property, the rabbit warren of little apartments that I live in, and go down Zaldistanishvili turn. And so we're going to walk down here and notice this is just a typical wall in Georgia. That's grapevines you're looking at. Grapevines festoon so much in Georgia. And I noticed this. And when I did notice it, I started to put a couple of things together. But first of all, let me just say how amazing it is to have grapevines everywhere. What this means is that if you're here in December, there are still grapes on the vines. So there is plenty of food just literally hanging around in Georgia. It seems like 99.9% of all the trees that line the streets have some sort of purpose, mostly a food purpose. But notice the little curlicues on the ends of the vines. Notice the way they're just looking for something to cling to. But the vines go everywhere. And what I started noticing, well, I'll show you in a bit. I just want you to get the shape of these vines, particularly those edges that curl upwards, looking for somewhere to attach themselves to. And this was actually one thing I was not expecting. I'm not a big summer person, and it gets pretty warm here. But the idea of a city covered in fruit trees is just really different to me. And here I was looking at some trees, and this woman and her daughter invited me in to photograph their arbor. And many people have a courtyard or an ezo, and they have grapevines crisscrossing above them. And they were very proud of their grapevines. I wish I had recorded a little bit more of their conversation, but I didn't. But they had a Marani, a little area, and the Krevevri, which is this rounded pottery, which the father made the wine in. Evidently, that's really a man's job to make the wine, although I'm sure there are women who do it as well. So let's just continue walking. There's some I think those are just standard vines. Yeah, that just looks like ivy. And there's a tree. Undoubtedly, that is a nut tree or a fruit tree. And in fact, while we're sitting here, let me tell you while we're walking to the next place, let me tell you some of the different kinds of fruits I have found on the streets of Tbilisi that you could just pick for free. Pomegranates, almonds, walnuts, figs, several kinds of plums, apricots, and I'm sure if I looked harder I would find peaches, quince trees, persimmons, mulberries, which are an amazingly tasty and purple fruit, and many, many varieties of grapes. So I love walking back through Tbilisi, particularly this is on the side of Mtatsminda, some kids playing on the street, and you see this everywhere. And I love it. I often reflect on the fact that in so many American communities, children no longer play on the streets. What has happened to us that has happened? That people are either trying so hard to protect their children, or the children are so lazy that they can't go out, or they're so obsessed with technology. But wherever you go, there are children playing on the street. And I'm old enough to remember doing this myself. But I remember it was sometime in the late 80s when I started noticing the desolation of children in America, all being driven indoors to watch videos, play video games, things like that. So anyway, I love these back roads. Now look at just the walls and such, and you may be saying to yourself, well, where are the people? Where do they live? They live behind the walls. They live in little courtyards, or ezos, they call them. And their life basically is pointed in to these courtyards, like the one I live in, except mine's really small and funky. But they're not, you don't walk down the street and it's not people sitting on their front porches. It's rather everything is turned inward and then everybody in your ezo. Makes it rather safe, actually, because you get to know the people that you're with. So, as I'm walking, I've just walked over a big hump to get here, and these are different streets. These are not all necessarily connected to each other, but I just want you to notice that everywhere you go, there's this greenery hanging around, and if you get up close to it, this is obviously going to be grapevines. And what a marvelous thing to have. Now look at this. This is what I really want to show you. Look at the wrought iron grill work here. The fence, and compare it to the leaves behind it. They're almost the same kinds of leaves on that vine. Now that's not a grapevine. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'll bet it provides edibles. This is on another street, and this is literally, it's a small alley further up in Mtatsminda. Mtatsminda is the big mountain. Mtatsminda means holy mountain. And this area goes all the way down to the river, and particularly down to Rustaveli Avenue. And there are all these little streets and alleys. Now this alley, I love it, completely covered, the alley itself is covered in grapevines. I can't wait to do this kind of thing myself once I find a permanent place where I can experiment with plants. It's just amazing. But you just look at this and you just say to yourself, there's always food. This is what's interesting. Georgia is a poor country, but Georgians will never starve, unlike people in so many other poorer countries. Why? It's because everywhere you go, the land is fertile. And the Georgians have a story saying that when God was passing out the lands, the Georgians missed the meeting. They were back in the back at their supra table and toasting and drinking wine, and they showed up and they said, "Okay, we're here, we're ready to go." And they said, "God said you're too late," and they said, "But we were toasting your name." And God was so touched by the fact that they were toasting in the name of God that he said, okay, I'll give you the land I was saving for myself. And it's Georgia. Just an absolute amazing variety of environments, climates, microclimates, and producing an amazing abundance of foods in all of these different climates, ranging from like New England to the South, to California, to the Alps, just all of this. But grapes. I love grapes now. Well, I've always loved grapes. I grew up in California when I was younger. And these are unripened grapes. And many of these come from different journeys that I've taken through just this one stretch that goes between about Rustaveli Square, walking just through these passageways in and out on the side of Mtatsminda, all the way over to Liberty Square, Tavis Suplebis Moedani. And look at this. I just love this. And one of the things, now if you go to France, every year, they will radically cut back trees. Georgians don't radically cut anything. They just let it grow. Look at this Art Nouveau grill work. This fence that's just sitting there. And I just want to go into that vine-encrusted courtyard. It's just incredible. I mean, Georgians need to keep up this stuff more than they do. Sometimes they let it kind of fall apart. But nevertheless, it's so suggestive, has so many layers of, I don't know, you just get lost in the shapes here. And it's those shapes that are almost directly related to that Art Nouveau grill work. And one of the reasons why Art Nouveau really caught on in Georgia is because of the relationship of those floral patterns and the fact that, Art Nouveau was all floral patterns. And here, look what is covering everything. You've already got the floral patterns in real life. And I love this kind of stuff. This is just covering a house. It's just incredible. I love it. So just taking these walks, it reminds me I've got to take another one soon. One time I was walking through one of these back streets and I met it. There were a couple of people there, a couple of younger boys and an older man, and I said, Gamar Joba. And then he was very friendly to me, and even though I couldn't speak much Georgian and he didn't speak any English, we just shared a great moment. And as we're walking, look at the buildings. And what you'll start to notice is how many of the older buildings, not the new postmodern buildings, we're not going to discuss them today because I've got my problems with them. But the older buildings, when we get to them, you're going to see, if you look at the windows and you look at the balconies and you look at the fences, how much you're going to start seeing the imitation of the foliage. Now these are all like walnut trees. You're going to see the imitation of the foliage and everything. Uh-oh, another cat. Who is that? I don't know. There are, I would say, hundreds of thousands of cats here in Tbilisi, just running wild. And people feed them. They like cats, but most of these cats never come indoors. But what's great is, like, look at this fence. And again, it's just got these little ornamentation patterns. And the ornamentation patterns are related back to the vines. And this is one of the central features of Georgian design. I have a whole book, maybe sometime I'll share it with you, on ornamentation in Georgia. And it's all these immense curlicue designs and patterns and such, ranging from the Middle Ages all the way through to the Soviet period. And then not so much one of the normal designs, but even this kind of patched together tile work somehow connects. It's the curving patterns. Here you have something that's kind of from the Art Nouveau period, and yet there's something about it that all connects together with the foliage and the trees. And this is kind of a boring fence here. That's probably a fairly modern fence, and that's one of the problems. What's happening is all the really beautiful ornamentation is being replaced by really dull, prosaic, modern materials, and I have no end of contempt for these things, but I love that. Look at that, just that little balcony, the fence on that, it's just incredible. And especially when you're walking along the street and you come upon these things and you just say, it takes your breath away, and they're just sitting there like works of art, and nobody's really noticing them. So, medium fence. It's not bad, it's not great, but boring. But and you'll see, there's just a hodgepodge of styles. But that hodgepodge is kind of Georgia too, because they've gone through so many periods, and the city has been around for a long time. So now we're passing these. People just kind of build structures going over into the street. But look at the windows, the curving designs in the windows. And that's probably from the Soviet era. And then I just love the architecture. And the balconies themselves are a real feature of Georgian life. There are so many of them everywhere you go, especially in the older parts of town. Check out this gate. That's all I'm going to say. And that gate, to me, screams Grapevines. And you can make your own mind up. But to me, it's the grapevine that is the basis of one of the central aspects of Georgian art and design. Another one would be the church. And there are a few others, but those are the central motifs that people use to... Oh, there's another balcony that I missed. So let's see, where are we? We're going to keep walking, looking for things. We're just kind of roaming around. I haven't got anything particularly on my mind. But look at this. You just, random street. You can go up it or leave it alone. Go down here. And now we're coming to something, another tree. I'm sure it's a fruit tree or a nut tree. And now we're coming to something... I've just never seen anything like this before. I showed you that one street. Oh, by the way, here's some pomegranates. I told you they're there also. There's several places I can just walk by and the pomegranates will just be sitting there. And in pomegranate season, you could probably just pick one and no one would mind, because people often leave all this fruit on the tree. They're not starving, so there it is. Pomegranates. But let's go back to this street. Check this out. This is like a fully laden grapevine stringing across the street. At first I thought it was being strung across on electrical wires, but actually they run cables across the street and just let these things kind of take over. And to me, this is brilliant, and even humanizes some of the duller post-independence, post-1991 architecture. Because there's something truly human about letting the foliage and the vegetable life, the trees, the vines, letting it all just grow. And like I was saying before, the French trim it all back, but the Georgians will let it... The only time they'll cut a tree is if it's about to fall into someone's house. That's about it. And whereas the French do it regularly, and there are other places that are, try to keep everything neat. But I love the overgrown quality of Georgia. And here's one of my favorite little clusters of grapes hanging out on a cyclone fence. And it's actually green grapes, no seeds, sensational taste. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little tour of the Mtatsminda area of downtown Tbilisi, just off Rustaveli Square, but we never went down to the main Rustaveli Boulevard. And instead we stayed in the kind of the hillside area between the beginning of the Mtatsminda mountain and the more populated and touristed areas. And I find it fascinating. I've realized Georgians will never starve. Why? They have fruit trees and nut trees everywhere. What a great idea. If in California, instead of putting all those ornamental plants, people put things you could eat, nobody would starve in the long run. But in the end, that is the world. Many people want just ornamentation. They don't want practicality. But I prefer this world that's just completely overgrown with far more than you can possibly eat just hanging around on trees. Well, for Georgian Crossroads, this is Byrne Power saying thanks for coming along, and nachwamdis. We will meet again.